Today, we turn to a tense and revealing exchange on Capitol Hill, where Senator Angus King pressed Army Secretary Pete Hegseth over the politically charged issue of renaming military bases once dedicated to Confederate leaders.
Senator King.
Mr. Secretary, I'm somewhat puzzled. I grew up in Virginia where Robert E. Lee was revered. I think when I was a kid, his birthday was a school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I learned that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He took up arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon entering his career at West Point. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics, finding current soldiers or other soldiers to rename? And you slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names. Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy, Pickett, the other names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do, all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to.
Talk
to people that serve at Bragg. Ask people that serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning if they like the fact that the names have been returned. And to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. And thankfully, because so many men and women in this country have served, there's a Benning and a Bragg and a Pickett and a Hood has a Silver Star or a Medal of Honor that we could rename the base to because of the limits of what Congress allowed us to do. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States. Let me talk about the budget. I don't understand why the budget is coming to us in two pieces. Why not give us an honest base budget instead of putting a piece of it in reconciliation? As I understand it, OMB is saying we're going to have a flat defense budget for the next 4 or 5 years. Are we planning reconciliation every year from now on? Why not give us an honest budget telling us what your priorities are, and then we can consider it. This committee always works in a bipartisan basis on the defense budget. We all want to see some increases in the defense budget, and yet you're giving us this this fake, here's a piece of the budget, here's another. You're cutting, in the base budget, you're cutting shipbuilding in half and saying, well, we're going to make it up in reconciliation. Are we going to have reconciliation every year, which basically, by the way, puts a significant part, 10 or 15% of the defense budget in a wholly partisan decision-making process, whereas in the history of this committee, it's always been bipartisan. Why are we doing it this way?
Senator, from our view, the budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. And
that's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions. Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is?
We're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's 2 bills, 1 budget.
Haven't asked my
We're
question
working with
yet. Why is it-
OMB,
why is it
and
being
we
done
feel
this
very
way?
comfortable
Why
with
is
the
it being
number of
done this way?
$961 billion.
Why don't you give us a straight-up budget for the Defense Department? That's my question.
Senator, this is a straight-up budget for the Defense Department, and it's a
It is
13%
not.
increase over what Joe Biden
It is a
gave us.
two-part defense budget. Part of it is in reconciliation instead of in the budget that's being presented to this committee. This committee only has a partial review of the budget. I don't understand why we can't have an honest, straightforward budget instead of this son of Oko that you're putting over on us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What unfolded was more than a policy disagreement. It was a clash over history, identity, and the question of who gets honored in the institutions that define American power. If you appreciate in-depth breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe for more. Senator King opened with a personal reflection. Growing up in Virginia, he said, Robert E. Lee was celebrated to the point that his birthday was a school holiday. But King explained that adulthood and historical study changed his view. The senator framed Lee plainly as someone who broke his oath, took up arms against the United States, and fought to preserve slavery. King's point was sharp. Why, he asked, would the Defense Department try to return bases to names that honor individuals who led a war against their own country? Stay with us and remember to subscribe if you want more clear, fact-based political reporting. Secretary Hegseth countered by leaning heavily on tradition and sentiment within the military community. He argued that service members have a deep emotional connection to names like Fort Bragg and Fort Benning. According to him, the push to revert to those names came from veterans who trained, deployed, and returned home through those installations. Hegseth framed the issue not as honoring Confederate officers, but as maintaining continuity and morale within the ranks. This is where it gets interesting, because it highlights a genuine divide between historical accountability and institutional nostalgia. If you find this kind of context helpful, be sure to subscribe for more analysis. But King pushed back hard. He insisted the renaming process is not about erasing history, but acknowledging it honestly. To continue honoring Confederate leaders, he argued, is to overlook the fact that they waged war against the Union and did so for the preservation of slavery. In King's view, naming federal military bases after such figures is not heritage, but insult, especially when the United States has no shortage of heroic service members whose valor represents the country's ideals. This moment is a reminder of a deeper debate playing out nationwide. It asks whether tradition should outweigh the moral lessons that come from an accurate reading of history. If you think conversations like this matter, hit subscribe to stay informed. Then the hearing took a sharp turn. King shifted from symbolism to budgeting, accusing the department of presenting a split, opaque financial framework. The core of his criticism was that the Pentagon was offering a base budget around $892 billion, while quietly shifting a large portion of defense spending into a reconciliation bill, bringing the true figure to about $961 billion. King argued that this approach masks the actual cost of defense, places major spending decisions into a partisan process, and breaks from the committee's long-standing bipartisan tradition. This was more than paperwork frustration. It was a concern about transparency and the structural integrity of how national security decisions are made. If you want more straightforward explanations of complicated policy issues, make sure you subscribe. Secretary Hegseth insisted nothing deceptive was happening and that the two pieces together represent a single consistent budget. But King highlighted a broader point. When budgeting is split, it becomes harder for Congress and the public to see the full picture, harder to debate priorities honestly, and easier for political gamesmanship to shape military funding. That is why he pushed for a single, straightforward proposal rather than what he called a trick played on lawmakers and the American people. This exchange matters. It shows the layers beneath our political fights, layers that touch history, identity, public memory, military culture, and the mechanics of federal budgeting. These are not just ideological disagreements. They are debates over how a country tells its story and how it prepares for the future. If you care about clear, thoughtful news analysis that helps you understand both the moment and the meaning behind it, don't forget to subscribe.